Hello and welcome. I have today with me Beverly Golden. Beverly is the author of Confessions of a Middle-Aged Hippie, and it's an honor for me to introduce her. And Beverly, would you please introduce yourself to our viewers?
Hello, everyone, and thank you again for the opportunity. I always love to have a great conversation, especially about my book. I have lived my whole life in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, so hello to all the Canadians out there. And my book really is, in some ways, it's a memoir that travels through a lot of different periods of my life. I spent a lot of my life in the music industry, so in the entertainment industry, and I've had a lot of health challenges in my life. So it's kind of this balance. It's a memoir that looks back at some of the key stories in my wild and wonderful adventures. I also have a background in marketing. So I like to say I have the brain of a marketing person, but the heart of a writer. And for most of my life, words and writing have always been a really, really key component. I love words and I love sharing ideas through words. So I think that's the short version of who I am. The long version might be might take too long to go through, but a lot of it's in the book.
Great, great. Now you have, as you mentioned, a background in marketing. Has that helped you in any way in coming up with the promotional ideas for the book itself?
I think, it's really interesting because a lot of people do have a very defined idea about the publishing industry. And of course, over the period when I first wrote the book, and then by the time I brought it to market, things had dramatically changed. So back when I wrote the book, I actually went to a book writing retreat. It was literally called Write Your Book in 8 Days. And at that time, we were still querying agents. The idea of a traditional publisher was still like really at the forefront of what was the conversation out in the world. And of course, by the time I had the book edited and did some other things, like started writing for the Huffington Post and some other places online, and finally had the book finished, the world had really changed. So the marketing to me is almost changing, it seems, pretty much as you blink your eyes. And of course, my idea is always like, how do I reach the maximum amount of people? One of the things about me is if everybody's sort of going right or everybody's doing a certain kind of marketing plan, I will say, why don't we try and create something different or something new? So a lot of what I do is very organic if it feels right. I mean, I had a wonderful experience recently with an artist, Peter Max, who's a really, really well-known artist. From the 60s, and I have a chapter in my book about meeting him the first time. So I had this idea that if I could connect with him and I could give him a book, right, and that would create a great marketing story. And as it happens, it did turn out to be a whole new story. I met his PR person, and there's always these new possibilities just by being out in the world and like keeping open, like really being open to these possibilities that are there. So that was just something fun and new, and another new story for me, right? So the whole thing about me is I want to have conversations with people, and there are a lot of people who are very curious about the hippie part because that does definitely have a connotation out in the world.
Right.
And I'm kind of flipping the hippies. So I'm kind of flipping what hippie means as far as we all are hippies, and it's about the hippie values. So that's a marketing. So everything I do in a way has a marketing twist to it. I don't want to say an angle, unless you say that in a positive way. So I guess marketing is just part of me, and I don't really think of it as I'm doing a marketing plan 1 to 10. I'm working more with what's presented to me and trying to maybe create a new way to do it, which is challenging in the noisy book publishing world or self-publishing world now.
Right, right. And talk a bit about the hippie message, which, like you mentioned, people may take the word at face value and think that you're talking about a hippie, but there's certainly a deeper message in the book. Could you elaborate more on what that message is?
I absolutely can because, it was interesting. Even my own brother, when I told him the title of my book, he goes, but you weren't really a hippie. So for most people, hippie is like sex, drugs, rock and roll, a certain lifestyle, like, freedom, sexual revolution. And it's all true because a lot of the things that were planted back in the 60s, the seeds, are very much part of our popular conversation now. So for me, a hippie is a value system. It has to do with world peace and love and community. and conscious living and organic living. So all of these things, music was a huge part of it. Art was a huge part of it. So this is a value system. Meditation was first introduced really back then. I think people became aware of it. So when you look at what's popular now in the conversation out in the world, and when I tell people this, guess what the reaction is? People go, wow, I didn't know this, but I'm a hippie. And I go, yeah. We all are hippies. And that's one of the real messages in my book trailer too. Why can't we all see that these values are part of who we are as human beings and live these values now? And we have that opportunity. So yay, hippies.
Yeah, absolutely. So was that message also what inspired the title of the book?
Well, it's really interesting because the first title of the book was very, very different. I've written my book in a rather unusual way. Apparently, nobody has ever written a memoir as an ongoing conversation. So I have this fictional talk show, the biggest talk show host in the world, interviewing me. So it's really this ongoing conversation between two people. So the original title was Meanderings. So if you take the word meanderings and you split it up, it was me and Airings. And then when I learned a little bit more about titles and how important a title is, somehow this title came to me, Confessions of a Middle-Aged Hippie, which was actually a title I had come up with years and years before, and I didn't know what that title was supposed to be for. So I said, you know what, I don't know. There's just something about this title, Confessions of a Middle-Aged Hippie. And of course, my subline is Observations of Life on Earth and Other Cosmic Meanderings. So I had the word meanderings in there anyways. And that's what I like to think I'm doing. I'm kind of taking these ideas out of the cosmos and bringing them down to Earth and having conversations about new and old things. So the title of the book is fascinating to me because you would think it only relates to people who understand or come from the generation. And what I'm finding is categorically it has little to do with the time you grew up in, but more to do with this curiosity also about the time and people who really identify with the value system.
You mentioned that you took some writing workshops, and I know that you have a lot of experience writing. You wrote for the Huffington Post, among other places. Were you taking that writing workshop because you wanted to learn more about what it is all about to become a writer, or were there some similarities that you were able to kind of transplant into being an author?
Yeah, and one of the things is I always thought I'm a short-term author. I'm not a long haul. I'm not like a book writer. I'm not a fiction writer. I really talk from my own experience and observations of the world. So the way this happened was I was literally on a vacation in Sedona, and I was having a conversation in a swimming pool with a woman who is an artist and a writer. And she said to me, I just had the most fantastic experience. I just went to this writing retreat. And she said, everyone who goes to this writing retreat literally writes a book in 8 days. Well, if you know anything about me, I love the short process, right? Like, how do you get to that end result in a short amount of time? And my ears were perked, and I went, wow, writing a book, maybe I could do that. So the story's in the book because she never got back to me. She didn't tell me who the person was. I did the research, and I pretty well knew, I think, from the moment she told me, I'm going to try this. I want to see if I can write a book. So there's a whole, it just was really an interesting story because the book in a way channeled, and I don't mean that, I was walking and I was having this conversation. Like these stories, these life stories just showed up, and I trusted them because if I tried to analyze it, it might not make sense. They're not in any particular order. They go from the 70s to the 2000s, back to the 60s, and they just sort of meander all over the place. So for me, the retreat was more about, can I write a book? And it was like a carrot on a stick. Everyone who goes writes a book, and everyone who went wrote a book. There were 30 of us there at that particular retreat. So it's not about how to write, it's about getting out of the block, getting out of the left brain into the right brain, and actually being there with like-minded people who all have a common goal, and all the distractions of everyday life are removed, and basically you have this opportunity to see what shows up for you. So that's really how I wrote this book. And it's interesting when I hear about people laboring over the process, because I think a lot of times our analytical left brain does kick in, and all the doubts and all the resistance and all the fears show up and maybe block the creative part, the real, the juice, the meat of the book coming out.
Right.
So that's how, a little bit about why I wrote the book. And I still love writing short pieces. I love doing the research, having the experience, and, having them out on the Huffington Post like quickly. So, I mean, the common question for all authors is, so what's next?
Right.
I'm like, well, in this moment, I'm still with this book, right? I'm still with the book because it is an ongoing process. And I think once you birth a book, you never give up on the book, right? It's always a part of what you've offered the world or you've given to the world. So, yeah.
What is a takeaway for you in going through this book writing process?
Because it's a memoir and because it's my personal stories, like I said, what I love is having the idea, writing the piece, editing the piece, doing the research before that, and then having it out in the world. So the process for me of the book was going over and over the stories again. I had a brilliant editor. I was very lucky. I did have two different editors I worked with. The first one really was more manuscript evaluation, and she's brilliant. She's been doing it for 30 years, worked in very high-profile companies. She was very helpful in me pulling it together so it was credible to a reader from the perspective of I had a fictional character and then me being real, right? And so pulling that together. And then I found the perfect editor, which I have to say I would recommend to everyone. And you have to have an editor who gets you and who really respects and maintains your voice. Because that, to me, is the key, that I had a person who got me immediately, and it really remained my voice throughout.
Right. How did you go about selecting your publisher?
The publisher, yeah. A lot of people still in the traditional publishing world, this whole idea of having a proposal is very key. I took a little bit of a proposal writing course with the same gentleman who had the writing retreat, and I started writing a proposal, and something about it felt not natural to me. I don't know, it just didn't feel right. So I started looking at all the options, self-publishing options, the smaller publishing houses, and then somehow, again, through a person I met at this writing retreat, who's one of my best friends still. She lives in California. She'd heard about this press called Motivational Press, and the fellow who owns it has his own illustrious background for a young man. So I checked him out, and it looked and sounded really great. They're considered a mid-tier publisher, whatever that means now in the industry. But it still added a little bit of credibility, a little bit of help in distribution. That was a really big thing for me. How do you get the book distributed far and wide? Considering I didn't really have a full-blown marketing plan. So it was like, I want to make sure the book is widely available. So that was part of the reason, I looked at a lot of different people. I mean, I did a lot of research. I have a research background, so that was an easy thing. And then it just flowed, and it made a lot of sense. He does a lot of business books, so that was one consideration. Like, I'm not really a business book, but I'm definitely a motivational and inspirational book. Just by the nature of my stories. So I went with them, and I thought, well, what's the worst that can happen? There's always a way to take yourself out of that, and it's still your book. So that's one thing I would recommend. You make sure you own, out and out the copyright, and do have a way out of the contract, so that if you wanted to do something else with it, whatever that would be. So yeah, that was the process for that.
Now, with your background in marketing, one may actually say that you had an advantage in terms of book promotion. Did you find that to be the case?
I think out in the world, almost anything goes. So like, I hear what you're saying, but like I said, I didn't have a very firm marketing plan. I'm still going, okay, how do I get to the maximum amount of media people? Because really what I want to do is have conversations out in the world. So, I mean, one of the things we all hear is do not expect to sell a lot of books. The book is kind of your calling card or your business card, and we're encouraged to have other products or other services or other backdoor. I actually have studied a lot of the online marketing people and been involved in some of that training. And it's like, at this moment in time, I do have some things, but I don't have a product. My product is me. It's my ability to have conversations conversations with people and influence people that way, hopefully positively. And my book, so from that perspective, I really went into it a bit naively because it's challenging to sell a lot of book copies. So my focus right now is how do I get the attention of the media? So this idea of connecting with Peter Max and then possibly his PR person and then some other project, so those types of things are my marketing ideas. Like how do you get to a higher level than just sort of pounding the pavement and doing book signings or younger people, that's great. I think it changes. I think it changes depending on the age you are and what your message is and who your audience is.
Right. And speaking of the audience, actually, this is a good segue to who is the perfect or the main target of Confessions of a Middle-Aged Hippie?
At first I would say, oh, it's everyone. And people will go, oh, no, that's like the death trap. Do not say that. And I just met a brilliant marketing man, very synchronistically, who's, at a very high level of marketing. And this is the man I helped with his book, Get Unblocked from his book. And he said to me something that I'll offer. He said, who's your conceptual target? The psychographics, not the demographics. And I said, oh, that makes so much sense to me. Because if I try to put it into demographics, it won't work for me. Because I've had people in their 20s, so I've had all age groups of people. I think it's for really what I am is for courage seekers, for people who want to make a change in their life. They're a little bit awake. They know that they want to do something different, and they really want to live their life to the fullest. And somewhere along the line, they're stuck in that, whether it's complacency or their comfort zone, or they don't know how to do it. What I see is my book gives people this inspiration, right? That it's possible. That there is always another way, and that's one of my new taglines. There is always another way, and I very much learned that through all my health issues, and that. I'm pretty candid about that in the book, and I know you've seen the video. I put the picture in the video of me weighing 89 pounds when people said to me, this could go either way. This doesn't look like this person's going to survive. And I'm like, yeah, let me show you what's possible. So that's it. I'm kind of this beacon of what's possible in the world. And hopefully through my stories, people say, wow, yeah, I want to find my courage and get out there and do the things I want to do. Have no regrets.
Now, to the risk of sounding repetitive, what's next? Are there any projects, any book projects on the horizon?
I have a fascinating project that I started working on a couple of years ago with a gentleman who I met, who is so passionate about golf that it is actually one of his soul callings. I hope that makes sense to people. And he finds such richness and such passion out of the game of golf and sees the correlation between life, which I'm sure you've heard. Golf is probably the most interior game and really does mirror life. So he just approached me and said, I'm pretty sure we want to write a book together. So we started writing the book. I have never played a game of golf. I know nothing about golf. So this was a very exciting opportunity for me to listen to somebody's stories and then translate that into chapters of a book. So I just heard from him, and he's very committed now that the timing is probably right and that we work, that this book comes out to the world. So anyone who plays golf knows there's 18 holes. So we've got 19 chapters, which is apparently the extra hole. It's the going the distance. So that's one project that's in the works. And as far as writing, like I said, I love writing short pieces. I just wrote an article about meeting Peter Max again and what that was like, and that my book had a bucket list. And people were like, wow, that's really cool. I go, yeah, I did the first thing on my book's bucket list. I got a book to Peter Max. I got a signed copy of the book. So it's just being open. For me, if I don't like to box myself in, and I find writing is very intuitive and very inspirational for me. So I am not a writer who sits down and writes from 9 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock every day. Somehow it all, and I'm going to do this because it all sort of comes from the cosmos for me, and all these ideas, and I just sit down and write something, and it's very rewarding to me to write a piece that's 12 or 1,500 words, be able to edit it and have it out in the world. So maybe all of my Huffington Post pieces become a book.
Yeah, that's sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, so that's the very possibility, we'll say.
Okay, yeah, I look forward to that. Now, where can people get a copy of the book?
Well, the good news is the book is really widely available. So not necessarily in bookstores, although when I was just in the States, as you know, I was in Florida and had a great time there. And I walked into a Barnes& and Noble and I said, if I wanted to order my book, would you be able to bring it into the store? Because it isn't always that case when it's available online. So they looked it up and they go, yeah, we can order this for you. And I went, yay. So it's obviously on Amazon, all Amazons, Amazon England, Amazon France, Amazon Canada. I was very careful. I wanted to make sure people in Canada could buy books from, for example, Chapters Indigo. For anybody who's Canadian, they know that's our big chain. So anywhere online, my book is available.
Okay, great, fantastic. And is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I'd love to hear from people who read my book, and I really invite people to watch, the YouTube video. It's basically Confessions of a Middle-Aged Hippie book trailer, and I just really encourage everyone to think a little bit outside of their comfort zone and know there is always another way in life, and to really trust what's coming to you. Like I say, the future that's coming towards us, and you have to be open to that. And there's a lot of people who close themselves off and think there's only one way to do something. And it's like, honestly, in my life, I have tried so many different things, and it's always amazing what's possible. It is truly, and this sounds like a cliche, beyond what you can even imagine. And I just encourage people to stay open to that and trust their inner voice. That's a really big one for me. That's what I've done a lot in my life, where people have said they didn't agree with me, and I just went, you know what? Thank you. I'm going to trust something in me that is my truth, and that really speaks to me. So far, so good. So far, it's worked, and I'm still here, despite some people not thinking I would be. And that's the other thing, especially with health issues. That has been a huge one for me. So I'd like to believe that I can offer some hope of what is possible in that area, regardless of your diagnosis, because I've defied a lot of diagnoses in my life.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, I certainly appreciate it. It was a pleasure talking to you about Confessions of a Middle-Aged Hippie. It's a fantastic book. I also did see your trailer, and it's unlike any trailer I've ever seen before. So I think this is a good read for anyone who's watching this, and certainly grab a copy on Amazon or on Barnes& and Noble or most distribution stores. Again, thank you very much for joining me, Beverly. I hope to talk to you again.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. Remember, we're all hippies at heart.